From the unexplained to the mundane, come join us on a journey to the fringe. Hello and welcome to Journey to the Fringe. The podcast, apparently, according to one anonymous poster, does not understand what white culture is. So we got that going for us, and that guy's got some things he needs to work through.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we're your podcast hosts, Taylor and Chelsea, here today doing something completely not that, so I hope I didn't scare too many people off with that cold open. Because it is somewhat of a genetic topic, but not really. And I'm just going to get into it, Chelsea.
Okay. I'm just waiting to hear what this is. There's been so much buildup around this episode. And the white culture.
I'm going to address that first part of that statement with the fact that I was inspired by an episode that came out this week.
Whose episode? Ours?
I'm just going to get going with it.
Okay.
Human beings have never been a single shape, size, or story. Across our species' history, we've come in a remarkable range of forms. Tall, short, broad, slight. Sometimes forms we didn't even know existed until the ground gave up its secrets. Like for instance, in 2003, when on the Indonesian island of Flores, researchers uncovered the remains of Homo floresiensis, a small-bodied human relative who stood barely over a meter tall. Their discovery rewrote what we thought we knew about human variations and reminded us that the world has always held more kinds of people than we expected. But long before paleoanthropologists found the so-called hobbits of Southeast Asia, cultures around the world were already telling stories about small human-like beings who lived just out of sight. These weren't abstract myths or symbolic creatures. They were described as neighbors, sometimes helpful, sometimes dangerous, sometimes simply there, living in forests, mountains, caves, and even the edges of villages. And in many places, these stories didn't stay in the past. People still report encounters with these beings today.
Really?
From the Memegwesi of the Great Lakes to the Menehune of Hawai, from the European fairy folk to the mysterious cave dwellers of Ireland and Scotland, the idea of little people is one of the most widespread and persistent threads in human storytelling. It crosses continents, languages, and belief systems, and whether these beings are interpreted as spirits, ancestors, hidden populations, or something else entirely, the consistency of descriptions is hard to ignore. So in this episode, we're stepping into a global pattern, into sightings, folklore, and modern accounts that suggest that for as long as human beings have been paying attention, we've been seeing and sharing the world with something smaller, stranger, and far more elusive than we are.
Is this separate from elves and fairies?
Funny enough, they kind of fall into this category, Chelsea, and it's going to come in as we get going. From my understanding of fairies, it's a catch-all term for a wide range of beings you could potentially be seeing that span an entire size, shape, color variety.
Okay.
And some of them do fit that description, not all of them though.
Okay, fair enough.
And from pretty much every continent, every part of the world, we do have tales and stories of little people. The native peoples of North America told legend of a race of little people who lived in the woods near sandy hills and sometimes near rocks located along large bodies of water, such as the Great Lakes. Often described as hairy-faced dwarfs in stories, petroglyph illustrations show them with horns on their head and traveling in groups of 5 to 7 per canoe. The Pryor Mountains of Montana and Wyoming are said to house fairy rings, and other legends say that little people, if seen by an adult human, would beg them not to say anything of their existence and would reward those who kept their word for helping them and their family out in times of need. From tribe to tribe, there are variations of what little people's mannerisms were like, and whether they were good or evil may be different. One common belief is that little people created distractions to cause mischief. Lewis and Clark reported in their journals that Native Americans in the vicinity of Spirit Mound, South Dakota, held a belief in little people who inhabited that mound. Clark wrote that the local Native Americans could not be persuaded to approach the mound as they feared these little devils and considered them to be dangerous. Although members of Lewis and Clark's party visited the mound, they did not encounter any unusual beings. Across Europe, stories of small human-like beings are so old they blur into the bedrock of landscape. In Ireland and Scotland, they have the Sitae, brownies, and the Gruagach, where these are all described not as winged fairies, but as people, small, elusive, territorial, and tied to ancient mounds or artificial caves. Farmers reported seeing them at dusk, moving along the stone walls or slipping into openings in the hills. In Scandinavia, the Nisa and the Tomta were household-sized beings who lived alongside families, sometimes helping, sometimes punishing disrespect. And in the Alps, the Heinzelmännchen were said to work at night, leaving behind tiny footprints in flowers or ash. Across the Pacific, little people appear not as tricksters but as engineers. In Hawaii, the Menehune are said to have built fish ponds, temples, and irrigation systems under cover of darkness. Some of these structures, like the Alacoco fish pond, are real works of ancient engineering disappearing, and local tradition insists that they were built by a small industrious race who vanished when larger peoples arrived.
Oh, I did know that for Hawaii, which is a weird tie-in because the only reason I know it is because the Disney hotel there has a thing tribute
About that?
like a whole section of the hotel about that. There's my random knowledge about why I know that.
Oh, okay. In New Zealand, Maori traditions speak of the Parapaerehe, pale, small forest dwellers who avoided sunlight and lived in the misty highlands. They were not quite human, not quite spirits, and encounters with them were treated with caution. These stories persist into the modern era, with hikers occasionally reporting small figures moving through fog or dense bush.
Ooh, creepy.
In Southeast Asia, this is one of the few places where folklore and paleoanthropology collide. On Flores, the discovery of Homo floresiensis echoes local stories of the Abu Gogo, tiny hairy people who lived in the caves and stole food from villagers. Elders describe them as real, physical beings who survived into the recent past. Similar stories appear in the Philippines, where the duende, small earth-dwelling beings, are still reported today, often in connection with anthills, mounds, or old trees. Witnesses describe them as 1 to 2 feet tall, dressed in simple clothes, and quick to vanish when spotted. In the Amazon, many indigenous groups describe the Chula Chukwi or the Curupira, small forest guardians with backward-facing feet. They are said to mislead hunters, protect animals, and appear suddenly on forest paths.
The backwards feet.
Some modern sightings describe small, human-like figures darting between trees or watching from branches. Encounters treated not as myth, but as part of the forest's living reality. In the Andes, the Mukui is a tiny miner who lives in tunnels and shafts, warning or punishing miners depending on how they treat the earth. Reports from the 20th century describe miners encountering small figures deep underground, often in moments of exhaustion or isolation. Across North Africa and the Middle East, stories persist of little desert people, small, quick, human-like beings who live in caves or abandoned ruins. Tuareg and Berber traditions describe them as ancient inhabitants of the land, predating the arrival of larger tribes. In some regions, travelers still report seeing small figures watching from cliffside openings or hearing tiny footsteps in wadis at night. Now, across the continents, there's a pattern that kind of arises. There's small human-like beings living at the edges of human territory. Their preferred habitats are caves, mounds, forests, and ruins. These are described as physical encounters, not symbolic, and there's a mixture of fear, respect, and coexistence around them. And in many of these places, modern sightings echo the ancient stories almost as they're presented. From here, Chelsea, we're going to take this episode into more of a people describing encounters with these small creatures, or at least some. I couldn't quite just do that because Henderson Peters has a really good part of his website on just little people across Canada.
What?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a few of the ones that are just really close to us that he was able to come up with.
Yeah, make it real specific to us, please.
Yeah.
I love that.
So specific that you can all find us fairly easily. First part I found from his website is dwarfs in Shuswap tradition.
Oh, no, I know exactly where this is. It's in the Enchanted Forest.
Yeah. That we can never go to.
Yes,
we can only drive
I
by.
can only assume this is why we're not allowed to step foot there. Family tradition.
West of Stony Territory is British Columbia's interior plateau, whose native interior Salish also have legends involving little people. Celebrated Canadian geologist and surveyor Dr. George Mercer Dawson touched on the Shuswap version of this legend in his 1892 book, Notes of the Shuswap People of British Columbia.
1892?
Quote from this book: little men called Suinitum are reported to exist in several places. The most noted locality is Bighorn Mountain, perhaps present-day Pincushion Mountain north of Peachland. Situated 20 miles down the Okanagan Lake on the west side. They hunt with bows and arrows, and while represented as being only 2 feet high, yet they are able to carry a deer easily. In contrast to this, when a squirrel is killed, they skin it and take only a part as the whole is too heavy for them.
Hold on.
The Indians are very much afraid of them. End quote.
What? But it can carry a deer?
Yeah.
What about a donkey fox? Probably.
I don't think they had the technology at that time
Doesn't
and place.
sound like it, actually. Interesting. That's crazy. I love that. I've never heard little people stories around here.
There was way more, Chelsea. Just he worked his way across Canada for this. I just picked out a couple because I'll send you the link. In fact, it'll probably be in the notes. Scots-Canadian anthropologist James Tate elaborated on the Shuswap conception of the dwarves in an ethnological treatise for the 1909 issue of the Memoir of the American Museum of Natural History. Quote, "The Indians believe in a race of dwarfs, which were at one time very numerous in many parts of the country, but are said to be seldom seen now. They are about 2 feet tall and gifted with great magic. Their women dress their hair in a knot at each ear, like pubescent girls, and the men tie theirs in a knot at the back of the head in the manner of pubescent lads. They do not harm people and are as wild as game." End quote. Tate later reproduced an old Shuswap story in which a young man became lost while hunting in the wilderness, despairing that he would never again see his family or friends. The young man began to weep. Suddenly, the hunter found himself face to face with 2 tiny women, who had their hair done up like young girls, who inquired into the cause of his lamentations. When the hunter explained that he was lost, the dwarves laughed and assured him that his village was not far away. The little women directed his attention to a nearby hill and informed him that he would be able to see his people's camp from its heights. They warned the hunter not to tell any of his fellow band members that they had helped him, or else evil would befall him. The man did as instructed. He clearly didn't, if we know the story. The man did as instructed and arrived home in an impossibly short time. Quote, "The dwarfs had contracted the distance so that it was only a short walk, but in reality the man had been a long distance from home. For a long time he told no one, but one day, describing his adventure as the time when he was lost, he said, 'I never should have reached home had it not been for 2 dwarf women who showed me the way.'" End quote. Shortly after saying this, he died. The dwarfish ability to contract walking distances for human travelers is another element which native Canadian folklore has in common with the Anglo-Celtic fairy lore of Newfoundland. And then the dwarfs of Thompson tradition. The Shuswap's westerly neighbors is the Nalakapamiks, or Thompson Indians, have their own dwarf stories, some of which Tate reproduced in an ethnological treatise for the April 1900 issue of the American Museum of Natural History. The Upper Thompson, whom Tate refers to traditionally, inhabited British Columbia's Stein River Valley and the Thompson Canyon, while the southerly Lower Thompson abode in the Fraser Canyon and the northern Cascade Mountain. Quote, "The Upper Thompson believe in a race of dwarfs, who inhabit steep cliffs and forests. They are just like men, but their skin are pale and their bodies are very gaunt. They are only about 2 feet tall and they wander around the mountains, sometimes shouting, groaning, or weeping. Their eyes are sunk very deep in their heads. They run away from hunters and go into inaccessible places. They all wear clothes similar to those formerly worn by the Indians, but have never been seen with bows and arrows. They inhabit low, dense forests or live in dense woods in the mountains. It's said that they never kill, steal, or chase. They're rather fond of joking and playing tricks on people." End quote. Tate went on to explain how some Thompsons believed that dwarfs were the spirits of cedar trees, perhaps on account of their arboreal heritage. Some dwarf men were paradoxically said to grow taller than the tallest Indian, a peculiar attribute which they share with the elves of Inuit tradition. Thompson told Tate the dwarfs seemed to have vanished from the Spence's Bridge area on the Thompson River sometime in the late 1800s, but were once quite numerous in easterly Okanagan country. So just really cool that there's somebody actually doing the research on that and able to find like very specific lore in our neck of the woods.
Never even fathomed that that was even a possibility for something that would exist here. I don't know why I've never come across it before.
Yeah, and it seems it's because it's indigenous lore. And like there's a ton
That's true.
of tale outside of Bigfoot and indigenous lore, and even including Bigfoot, that we just don't really know because it's not something we're taught or really pushed to learn in this part of the world.
That's
which is
true.
very unfortunate.
It's not shared as knowledge, I guess. That's not the word I was looking for, but...
Yeah, European folklore is more common and like pushed on people
it's true.
than indigenous.
Yeah.
But enough about that. Let's go back onto the little people. And Chelsea, we are getting into actual first-hand accounts of sighting now, and we're going to start off with your favorite, one from our pal Lon Strickler.
Oh, good.
This story is so great, Chelsea. And I don't really know how... Let's just read it. Hello, Lon. On the night around 9:30 p.m.
Is this your
November
story
10th,
to Lon?
2014. Yes.
Okay.
It's from an H, okay?
Okay, it's from an H.
Something my name does not have any of. I was driving home on I-20 heading west. I had been in Jackson, Mississippi, visiting relatives, and I was heading home to Shreveport, Louisiana. I make this trip many times a year, but I saw something that night that I cannot explain. I was approaching Monroe, Louisiana, near the turnoff to Garrett Road. I noticed something on the connecting road between the eastbound and westbound lanes. Other people noticed it because the brake lights on the vehicles were lighting up. As I slowed and got nearer, I could see that it was a little person running around in a circle with its arms extended, like it was imitating an an airplane. Since it was dark, I couldn't make out any features. By that time, some of the vehicles had practically stopped, and I pulled off onto the turn-off shoulder. I was afraid that it was a child. I called 911 and was told that others had made similar calls. Got out of my car and then noticed that a police cruiser was in the eastbound lane approaching the little person. I stood at the back of my car and watched. The police officer pulled into the connecting road. At the same time, the little person was running away on the grassy median, heading west in my direction. It was still difficult to make out the features on this little person, but I could see now that it was not a child. It was dressed in what looked like a long, dark-colored cloak. It stood about 3 feet tall, and it was making a hideous squealing sound that reminded me of a scared pig.
What is going on?
They continued to run west and past me. And there was another police cruiser in the westbound lane shining spotlights on this little person. Then suddenly, a huge, brilliant yellow light flashed from above this little person. It was blinding and lasted less than a second. I was shocked and stunned. My knees became weak and I needed to get back in my car and sit down. I looked out of my window and didn't see any spotlights or vehicle light. It was completely dark. Even the highway lights were off. I tried to start my car, but it wouldn't even turn over. I sat there dumbfounded, wondering what had happened. Then, after 20 to 30 seconds, the car turned over and all the highway and traffic lights came back on. I didn't see the little person after that. I pulled onto the turnoff and eventually found my way back onto the I-20 heading west towards home.
I love that story.
I still don't know what happened that night. I do believe there was lost time since I noticed that my clock showed 10:13 p.m. For several weeks, I was hoping that there would be some news about this incident, but I never noticed anything. I contacted the police in Monroe area and there was no record, according to them, of any calls. That was very unusual. I know this incident occurred. There were many witnesses who lost power to their vehicles as well.
I have so many comments. Can I comment?
Yeah, of course.
First of all, did he have his arms out like an airplane?
I know.
Second of all, why would he tune into the news thinking that it would be on the news? Would you think that something like that would be on the news?
Well, I mean, this is a few years after the leprechaun video went viral.
Okay.
So you gotta
make
think.
a good point. Love that. Where was that? Not Canada, right?
No, it was in Louisiana.
Okay. That would make a lot of sense for Louisiana for some reason.
Was the leprechaun in Tennessee? It was southern U.S.
Yes.
I know that.
Yeah. I think those are all my comments.
Okay. Lon did have some notes on this one. The witness is a middle-aged man who wished to remain anonymous at this point. I believe he was a bit intimidated since no one had come forward about this incident. I did reach him by telephone and we discussed other avenues of obtaining information, including the local media. We talked later, in which he informed me that none of the media had received any reports. I made a few inquiries, but to no avail. I hadn't seen any reports on the MUFON CMS or NUFORD. BB believes that 10 or more vehicles were affected by the bright flash of light. I asked about the little person and what his assessment was. He was reluctant to go into detail, but suggested that he felt that the little person was responsible for the flash of light. I believe this may have been a non-terrestrial encounter of some type, and there are several scenarios one could make for the flash of light, but I'll leave it up to you, Lon.
Yeah, I get the same vibes as Lon. I don't know, there's a couple of things that aren't what you have been describing in the other encounters with the little people that made it seem
and especially like the
non-terrestrial.
UFO part of it.
Yeah, definitely.
I shouldn't say UFO. Bright light and then disappears.
Yeah.
And the electricity not working.
Yeah, it has a little bit of a paranormal quality to it, especially with the missing, not especially with the missing time, but also including the missing time.
The next one I have comes from a website called Unexplained Mysteries from their forums. This was posted by a guy named Mark 1 on February 26th of 2018. He has a few posts that we're going to go over.
Oh, he's that lucky, hey?
This is a fun story. He apparently has a family history
with little people.
I've decided to share here on the Unexplained Mystery forums some family-related experiences with the paranormal that involve what would be better described as something to do with fairy folk. I'll start with my grandmother's tale.
Why the Unexplained Mystery forums? Why of all places?
Were you gonna post about little people?
I feel like somewhere different than the Unexplained Mystery forums. I don't feel like it would get the most traction there, but I don't know. Maybe.
To be fair, I scoured Reddit for stories.
Yeah, sometimes Reddit's no good. Sometimes it's
Searching
good.
little people on Reddit did not get me what I was looking for.
Wouldn't.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
I also learned, sorry, slightly off topic here. I did learn that there's an entire village of people under 4'3" in China. They'd all decided to start living together.
Oh, I knew this one too. Yeah, it has nothing to do. So they can avoid
scrutiny. But now they all dress up and live in mushrooms.
I did know this. I don't know how I know this, but it has nothing to do with Disney, I'm pretty sure.
It has nothing to do with Disney. They just decided, and then they realized it'd be easier to, like, they want to just live peacefully on their own, isolated, and then they're like, wait, we can probably, like, make a killing as, like, a small world place.
Fucking China, man. I wonder if this is where the donkey fox came from. I don't... Okay. Let's just continue with... There's too much with the donkey fox to unload.
The first account, Nan's story, takes place in the early 1950s, a few weeks after the birth of her first daughter. The house where it took place had long been associated with the paranormal. All who lived there often heard unknown footsteps upstairs, strange knocking sounds on the walls, and an occasional commotion that always seemed to take place after midnight somewhere in the kitchen. It always sounded like someone or something was shifting things around in there, in search of something. Annoyed, late-night investigations were always met with a sudden chilling silence whenever anyone reached the closed kitchen door. The kitchen itself was always found to be just how it had been left. Before bed, with nothing out of place. Everyone initially suspected rats, but the annoyingly high volume of the strange noises plus the lack of any evidence all pointed towards something else. The family dog was then placed in the kitchen at night. But this measure didn't deter the midnight prankster, and the poor dog became terrified. Many a night the household would be awakened to some noise, and their terrified pet who was both howling and also trying to scratch its way through the kitchen door. None of this unhinged my Nan. She was always a strong woman, and in the end she resorted to shouting at whatever it was with dire warnings of what she would do if she ever caught it. This eventually seemed to do the trick. The kitchen ghost, or effin' Horace, quote, effin' Horace, end quote, as she nicknamed it, somehow must have got the message, because eventually all the stamping and begging stopped. This didn't mean everything strange and spooky went away though. There would still be other weirdness, including apparitions and even her brother's old chest, but they are other stories for some other time. Nan's close encounter with something strange came long after the kitchen spook and seemingly left her house. It was evening and the house was generally cold. Central heating was still something only a lucky few had. Granddad was on the nights at the colliery. Nan and her baby were alone in the house. She took my mother to the bedroom and placed her in the cot by her side of the bed. Nan then got under the bed covers and then sang sweet songs to her. At some point, whilst doing this, she became aware of strange sounds out on the landing. Her first suspicion led her to assume it was the dog because the tip-tap sounds seemed to be coming from the floor. She soon dismissed any concerns about the sound because the bedroom door was shut. So there she was, minding her own business, smiling and singing to her beautiful baby daughter, when something from behind alarmed her. The tip-tap sounds were now clearly in the bedroom. She felt sure that she had closed the door and also knew it had not been opened. To prevent upsetting her baby, she continued to hum a nursery rhyme as her keen and angered ears took notice of the weird sounds on the floor.
I love that it makes her angry.
Her only conclusion was that there was a rat in the house. It was at this point that she felt something trying to climb up onto the bed. Now she still had her slippers on. Her plan was to turn over ever so slowly, grab one, and then whack whatever it was into oblivion. This is when she noticed her baby daughter's eyes, which Nan described as looking like saucers, old slang for wide open. The baby had clearly seen what Nan was soon to deal with, and to Nan's horror she suddenly felt its pressure on her lower back. That was it. Nan was having none of this and quickly spun around to kill the suspected rat. What she actually saw froze her in place with shock. It wasn't a rat at all. It was in fact a little tiny man who was now leaping off of the bed and back onto the floor. It was tiny, unclothed, and very obese along its squashed torso. She watched in disbelief as the thing she referred to as the Potato Man ran for its life back towards the closed bedroom door, which it then passed straight through. The increased tip-tapping sound of his tiny feet could be heard as it ran out along the landing and then onto the stairs. Nan always used to bring up that tale from her past, and she never changed her story. As I got older and more fascinated with the encounter, I used to quiz her about its shape, its look. She never saw its face, but did describe its hairless head as having a human shape. But the arms and legs were described as skinny or bony. She even saw its behind and the crease in between, which she often spoke of wishing she had whacked with her slipper. Whatever it was never came back.
Do you think it was effin' Horace or no?
It might have been effin' Horace. Now, his mother's encounter takes place when she was around 6 or 7 years of age, so not that long after that, actually. It was a sunny summer afternoon. She's been down the road playing a game with her friends and is now rushing home for her lunch. When she entered the house, same one as mentioned in the first account, she began to notice a strange atmosphere. She recalls the hallway and strange, weird feelings. As she rushed into the front room, she described seeing something sat on the hearth. At first, she thought it was some peculiar-looking doll, and so briefly turned her attention back towards Nan, who was sat near the window with a magazine. The thing on the hearth began to move slightly, from side to side. This is when my mother looked back at it and then screamed. Whenever my mother has spoken about this experience, she has always referred to the thing on the hearth as the elf. It was sat cross-legged, leaning forward with its face cupped inside its joined hands. Imagine a V-shape. She estimated its overall size to that of a 3 to 4-year-old child. Its body was very slim and it wore tight-looking clothes. Its trousers looked like they had been woven by a thick line of wool. The color was dark brown or black, and it was the trousers that had led my mother originally to believe it was a toy who someone had knitted clothing for. It wore tiny slip-on shoes, which also looked dirty. The torso of the elf was covered by a long-sleeved tunic, its color dirty-looking burgundy. She doesn't recall seeing its belt, and it didn't wear a hat. Now, whilst its body looked young, the face did not. She described its horrid face as similar to that of a wizened old man. Its dark eyes, which turned to look at her, appeared larger than ours. The image below, he includes a photo. The image below of a Lebanese elderly gentleman was what my mother had loosely matched what she can recall.
Okay.
But has mentioned the eyes were larger and the bridge of its nose was slimmer than that shown in the image. She doesn't remember seeing any hair on its head either. And so my mother ran back outside and onto the backyard in shock. Nan goes outside to see all the fuss is about, takes my mother back inside, and then find that the elf is now no longer there. And Chelsea, I'm just going to share my screen so you can see what she was describing. Yes.
So she didn't actually sketch it or anything. It's just...
No, this is an image they apparently found online. They're like, yep, that's it.
Oh, okay. I wasn't expecting that. This poor man, why is he being compared to this?
I don't think he knows, don't worry.
Okay. Nobody tell him.
But yeah, just a very generic old man, I would say.
Yeah, I would say too.
With a Irish cap and a turtleneck on. Long nose, big ears.
Yep.
So yeah, that's the unexplained mysteries.
I'm intrigued by the fact that a haunting of elves, so to say, in a house. I think I would rather elves haunting a house than anything else.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I know they're called the good folk.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The Okanagan Shuswap dwarfs sound like they're the ones you want to be interacting with. Elves can go south very fast.
I don't feel like those guys would be haunting a house. I feel like these are two distinct peoples, is the feeling I'm getting. I just go on vibes. That's mostly how I operate.
Okay.
I'm getting different vibes. But I feel like if I had a haunting that I suspected of little people, if I ever saw a potato man, first of all, the vivid image I get of the potato man, I can almost feel him. I
really love that she clearly saw his ass too, just out there.
I see him so vividly in my mind's eye, just running through the door. But I feel like there's better ways of living peacefully among little folk haunting a house than if you had a ghost or poltergeist or something like that. I feel like you could live more happily with a little person haunting. Elf, fairy.
Well, with this, and sorry, that's the whole thing. Fairies overall, I don't know. From the stories I've read, that's not what you want. But the little people interactions don't seem that bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I would...
one thinks it's an airplane, one's got its little ass out.
There's supposed to be... you haven't said any trickster stories, though there's supposed to be tricksters and, hide stuff and stuff like that. Other stuff seems scary to me. I don't feel like I'd want one of those hauntings. A little person hiding something on me, though infuriating, I might curse fucking Horus as well. I feel like I could live better with that. For the record, I don't know what record. I don't want a haunting in general, for the record. So, just to set the final record.
Now, this next story, it's fairly short. It's called The Barren Wisconsin Little Men Encounter. It's documented by Jeremy Clark, a ufologist. 13-year-old Harry Anderson saw 20 bald-headed little men near Barren, Wisconsin, one summer night in 1919. Harry was riding in a car with others in the Wisconsin countryside when the car ran out of oil.
It ran out of oil?
Yeah. For all we know, it's whale oil at that time, too.
I can't say that's ever happened to me. Ran out of gas plenty of times. But oil?
Harry walked to a farm to fetch some, and he was walking back.
A farm?
When he was walking back, he saw 20 little men walking along towards him in single file.
What's going on?
They had bald heads and white skin and wore leather knee pants.
What world does
held
Harry
up by
live
braces over their shoulders.
What the fuck is going on here?
They paid no attention to the terrified boy who ducked out of sight behind a tree, but muttered to themselves and sang a little song. Quote, "We won't stop fighting until the end of the war in 1994. End quote. The terrified Anderson, quote, heart pumping, end quote, continued on his way back to the car once the marching dwarfs had passed, by not once looking back behind him.
Where did you get this story?
It's a good question. I have to look really quick to see which of my...
You know what this gives me vibes of? A dream.
It kind of does.
Yeah.
But, like, he was walking to get gas.
He was walking to get oil from a farm. When does this story take place?
1919.
Okay, things might have been different back then. I mean, little people did roam the earth and sing at that time. I think that's around the time Snow White was around.
That's 1930s. Okay, and I actually have to look up where this next one came from.
Fuck, that was a good story. I like that one.
That one comes from either the W Files or Singular Fortean are both sources for that
Singular Fortean, isn't that Lon?
Is that?
I'm pretty sure it's Lon.
I thought he was the Fortean.
I'm pretty sure it's Singular Fortean. Oh, look, you continue.
Okay. This next one comes from, the original one is from Kenneth Arnold's story, The Proceedings of the First International UFO Congress. This is in 1950s in Oregon. Ellen Jorgensen, a University of Oregon graduate and very intelligent person, saw a dark-skinned, 9 to 12 inch tall little man wearing a little romper and sort of a plaid shirt, walking with a waddling motion across her breezeway, pass under the running board of a car and disappear. That's the entire encounter.
Oh, okay. Lon is not Singular 14, sorry. He has worked with them before, which is why I'm getting confused, because they did collaborate on Mothman a little bit, it looks like.
Okay. And this last one here, Chelsea, originally came from the book... Well, it doesn't originally. I read about it in the book Where the Footprints End, the really high strangeness Bigfoot story, written by Joshua Cutchin and Timothy Renner. Great book.
Great book.
There's going to be a lot of episodes inspired by it at some point. But I'm curious to see if you think this is a little person encounter.
Okay.
Just because it doesn't necessarily say it is, but I think it is. It all started with a curious, nervy woman named Pat Evans who found a footprint near her trash bags and decided to put out greasy bacon just to see what would happen. Thus began the amazing saga of the lady who fed Bigfoot. One Bigfoot became 3 and they began to venture beyond their usual haunts in the Creek Valley. Pat's friends from Columbus and West Jefferson would come at night and watch from her darkened home. Pat said, quote, "Them suckers was big. Tall enough they would burn the tops of my redbud trees. My whole front yard was burned up by these things. Anything they touched died. You couldn't believe it. They ruined my beautiful yard." End quote. As you have guessed, Pat's curiosity and boldness had gotten her into a deep trouble. Meanwhile, other strange things appeared in the triangle. The red glowing, quote, "something out of mythology," end quote. Half horse, half man was one. It had a pointed head and ears, fiery slanted eyes, beard, skinny wings. The horrifying apparition moved across the yard on long cloven feet, leaving hoof prints in the snow. That's not the little person part. Even more mind-boggling was the brilliant orange balloon that swooped down by the back door of the house one nice summer morning. It seemed to deliberately go slowly so that Pat and her husband ended up within touching distance of it. The basket of the balloon had 3 man-like figures in it. One man-like figure had on a black suit and the other 2 wore heavy black jackets with fur on them. The gentleman in the suit said with a very English accent, "And a good morning to you too." And then the basket rose rapidly up and out of sight, and after 18 months the silent triangle again became alive with normal night creature sounds and the para-apes never returning. I feel like the people in the balloon were little people, but I don't know for sure because they didn't state it, but just how they described, like they got close within touching distance and a balloon swooped down. I feel like they couldn't be normal size.
No, I think you're right, and it was the association with the Irish.
I just feel the normality of how the others are treating it is very much in line with like the little people.
I think you're right. The bigger question in my head at this point is what the fuck is going on at this woman's house? But
But
yeah,
we'll save the rest of that for a different time. There's a lot of stuff out of that book we'll be talking about at some point.
Yeah, I think the balloon was housing a little person.
And those are all the sightings I have, and the last part I need to talk about, just because this is the whole reason I ended up doing this episode. Now, we need to address this topic. Psychoactive plants and fungi absolutely show up in anthropology of little people, but they don't erase the phenomenon. They sit alongside it. In some parts of the world, little people appear in visions brought on by sacred plants, such as ayahuasca in the Amazon, amanita, muscaria in Siberia, psilocybins in Europe and the Americas, and that mushroom I can't remember the name of in China.
Yeah.
These substances reliably produce visions of small humanoid beings, but this doesn't explain the whole phenomenon. Many cultures with no psychedelic traditions have little people stories, and modern sober witnesses describe the same figures. So hallucinations may shape some of the stories, but they don't necessarily cover everything.
Yeah.
Which is a question I was kind of curious from that episode.
You know what? I did think about that at the beginning, and then I forgot about it. And
Okay.
I not to bring up everything that I was talking about on that mini, but what's to say that it's not opening your mind to see a reality of something just out of our eyesight? You know what I mean? Because what if they are everywhere and you just need the mushrooms to see them?
Maybe they explain itches.
They could explain a lot of things. They could explain why it feels like there's constantly a little potato naked man next to you.
It's just ass hanging out.
Or why sometimes you hear faint singing.
You know what, Chelsea? I'm just going to cover this last little bit because it didn't come up in our little talk. So
Okay.
There is a height restriction. You got to be under 4'3" to live in this village.
Oh, I thought
No,
to visit. Okay.
They have more than 120 residents at this point who live autonomously with their own diminutive police and firefighting
Wow,
force.
what's it called?
And then I have
China
no idea.
Little Person Village.
It's in the mountain area of Kunming.
Oh, wow. This is something. Am I offended?
Yeah.
I don't know.
They did it to themselves, so I don't know if we can be offended.
What? Where have I seen this? I don't know. This is crazy, though.
But that's where I had to limit this episode and also keep that little bit in about the little
Do people
village.
get sent there? I hope not.
No, you get to choose to go there.
Okay. It's like a utopia.
It was meant to be, but now it's a theme park.
Okay, can I have my points now? I have points.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Is it about the village or like the overall
The overall topic. Are there more points
Okay.
about the village?
No.
I might talk about the village again.
I can't get out of my mind the little, like, there's a fire and they got the ladder and they're all going and
You see
it
this?
feels so bad. No, in my mind.
Oh, okay, I was about to Google little person China fire. I hope they don't have fires. It looks like this place might be built out of stone.
Or asbestos. But I don't know
It
for
could
sure.
be that. I would actually bet on that. Okay, my points. I was going to interject, but you're just going so well at the beginning. I didn't. First of all, backwards feet. I hate that.
I know, and that's one of those weird ones that pops up a lot of places.
A lot.
Which kind of brings in that whole, like, unified theory of weird that George Knapp always talks about. How it's weird that it pops up so often in different places.
In different cultures around the world. We were just talking about that, on Ghouls, I think. What episode was that? Oh, the Crawler episode. We were talking about backwards feet. It comes up with the jinn. I was actually just listening to a podcast on one of the podcasts that I listened to, and they were talking about the lore of folklore of Trinidad, and they were talking about, don't quote me on this, something had backwards feet though. So it's funny that it's coming up here as well.
Japan as well has, I can't remember the exact creature, but there's at least one creature that has backwards
There
feet.
is, yeah, which I find terrifying. I think it's that uncanny valley thing where it's like human but not, so it just gives you the creeps.
It's kind of funny that never came up as a thing with black-eyed kids, because you feel like that's one of those things that would just be like close but not quite right with them.
That's true, yeah.
Have we done a black-eyed kids? We've done black-eyed
I
kids.
can't remember. Have we done? I don't think we have. I don't know.
know.
We've done too many freaking episodes now. We might just start redoing them. Not redoing them, but doing them by accident.
Just by accident.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing, if you saw a little person, this is from way back at the beginning, if you saw a little person and they offered you a reward or something to say you didn't see me, I might have the best intentions to not tell anybody, but I don't know that I could keep something like that to myself.
I would really want to have an in-depth discussion about that contract that's being entered, but I don't know in that time and place I'd be able to have that.
No, I don't.
I'd be in like a condition to be able to do that.
But
I'd be like, what do you mean tell people? What do you mean reward? What's this time period we're talking about?
I could just see how this would go for myself. I'd be like, holy shit, look at your little butt. It's out.
You're a little potato man.
And they'd be like, don't tell anybody you saw me. And I'd be like, how could I ever keep this quiet? I want to tell everybody. And he would be like, please, they'll kill my whole family. And then I'd seriously be in a really big ethical quandary, I think, as to whether I don't tell people or not. Because I would leave and I'd see a stranger and I'd be like, I just saw a little person's ass. It was glorious.
I wanted to hit it with a slipper.
It was so glorious. Like, I would never shut up about it for the rest of my life. I don't think, if I saw something like that. I'd tell everyone. I'd immediately be texting everybody. I'd walk into work the next day. I'd be like, guess what I saw yesterday? You're never gonna believe it. And nobody would believe me either. But they'd be like, or they'd be hunting down the guy's family, and I'd feel so bad because, it brings up such a, ethical debate, I guess you could say. They should talk about this in ethics classes. Anyhow.
They really should. And also, they should really elaborate more on the reward for not telling anybody.
Yeah, I wonder what the reward is. Do you think if I kept quiet for so long, this is really something to talk to a little person about?
Yeah, we gotta get one as a gift.
Yeah, we got it. If anybody has seen one, please let the gift
let us know, and then let us know what happens.
Yeah, please. We won't make you tell us about the little person, just stuff about the situation as best you can. And then, did I have another point? Those were some amazing stories. I love those stories. I love the weird things where you just can't put it together. We had it all on this episode. We had ass. We had little person planes. We had a UFO, maybe. We had
just a bunch of them going to war.
Like a whole bunch of them that made going to war. Singing songs. A bunch of real life ones that made a village in China. I loved this episode. You were right. I did love this episode. And to celebrate, I might go do some mushrooms to see some little people.
You got somebody to talk to. Okay. And with that, I have been Taylor, here with Chelsea. We are Journey to the Fringe. Thank you all for listening. We'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Journey to the Fringe. If you have liked what you have listened to, please like, share, subscribe, or follow, depending on what venue you are listening to us through. Also, please, if possible, leave a 5-star review, as that really helps us in the algorithms. Should you wish to interact with us, please check us out on your social media of choice. I bet you we are there. And if you really want to communicate with us and give us ideas for new episodes, or tell us that we're wrong and terrible, either way, please send us an email at journeytothefringe@gmail.com. For now, I'll see you in the next episode.